All right, welcome back to ABA Exam Review and the continuation of our RBT practice series, where we're going through the next set of RBT practice exam questions and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please subscribe if you have not already. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. As always, when you pass, please let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Stu spills spaghetti sauce all over his new white shirt. He throws the shirt in his washing machine and the sauce comes right out. Stu now throws his clothes in the machine immediately if he spills something on them. Why? All right, so we clearly have a behavior question. And in a behavior question, we always want to identify who are we looking at? Whose behavior? Sometimes you'll get questions with multiple people, multiple behaviors. So let's start with who. Well, this one's easy, right? Because we have a single person and we have Stu. And so what does Stu do? Well, Stu, when he spills spaghetti sauce on his new white shirt, he will throw the shirt in his washing machine. And what happens? The sauce comes right out. Let's break that down in antecedent, behavior, consequence. You should also do on behavior questions. Identify antecedents, identify consequences. Consequences are very important because consequences will tell us what changed, if anything, future behavior. We know Stu now throws his clothes in the machine if he spills something. So how does Stu's behavior change? Well, now in the future, Stu will throw clothes in the machine immediately. So Stu's behavior either maintained or it increased. And so when a consequence leads to an increase of a behavior or the maintenance of a behavior, we call that reinforcement. So what is the consequence here? Well, the antecedent is Stu spills sauce. The response is he throws the shirt in the machine. The consequence is the sauce comes out. So we know this is reinforcement because Stu's behavior increased or maintained in the future. Was it negative or positive? What was the consequence? The consequence was the sauce came out. In other words, the sauce was removed. And so when something is removed, when a stimulus is removed as a consequence, is that positive or negative? Well, that's going to be negative, right? Negative is removal, positive is added. We're removing the sauce as the consequence. So Stu's behavior was reinforced negatively. So if Stu now throws his clothes in the machine, it's because he was negatively reinforced. It's obviously not punishment because punishment would decrease Stu's behavior and his behavior did not decrease. And it isn't positive reinforcement because the sauce coming out is a negative consequence. Negative meaning something was removed. That's how we need to approach our consequence questions. Whose behavior? What was the consequence? Something added or taken away? Did it increase or decrease behavior? A new mom is attempting to sleep training with her newborn. The book she reads recommends waiting 5 minutes after the baby starts crying to go and check on them. What does 5 minutes most represent? All right, so the question is telling us to look at the 5 minutes. So let's break down the situation and what is the 5 minutes relative to? Well, we know the new mom is trying to sleep train the newborn. She reads a book that says she needs to wait 5 minutes after the baby starts crying to go and check on them. So if we look at this, the baby crying is the SD. The mom waits 5 minutes before responding. If we think about this, because it is a measurement question, if we think about this in terms of measurement, we have the SD, we have time, and then we have the first response. So what measurement measures time between the SD and the first response? A, interresponse time. When interresponse time is close, these two are very closely related, but interresponse time measures the time in between two responses. Response 1 to response 2, response 2 to response 3. We're looking at the SD of the crying and the first response. So what we're looking at is B, latency. The latency is 5 minutes. It takes, or the mom waits, or it takes 5 minutes for the mom to respond to the SD. Think about if your alarm clock goes off and it takes you a minute to get out of bed, latency is 1 minute. So that's the time in between the SD and the first response. Be careful with duration. Okay. Duration is also timing, as latency and interresponse time are, but duration has to do with how long a response lasts. We're not measuring how long the crying lasts. We're not measuring how long the mom's response lasts. We're measuring how long it takes in between that SD and the response. So be careful not to mistake duration for latency and interresponse time. If you don't understand that, that's okay. Go back and review. And then rate, of course, has to do with frequency. We don't have any frequency. We can't have a rate. Rate is a combination of frequency and time, but you have to make sure you have that frequency component as well as the time component to get rate. We don't have frequency, so it can't be rate. 5 minutes most represents latency, as the crying is the SD. The time in between is 5 minutes. So our latency is 5 minutes. Lauren's nail biting has gotten out of control. It is nearly a health hazard at this point. Lauren's team decides that they will provide Lauren with reinforcement whenever she is not engaged in nail biting. What intervention does this resemble? All right, who are we looking at? Well, we're looking at Lauren and her team, and the question is asking about the intervention that the team is using. So Lauren is biting her nails. The team says they're going to provide Lauren or give Lauren reinforcement. And here's the key: when she is not engaged in nail biting. So this is clearly differential reinforcement because we're reinforcing something, putting other things on extinction. So when you have a differential reinforcement question, first thing you ask is, am I teaching a replacement behavior? If I'm teaching a replacement behavior, then it's going to be a DRA or DRI, alternative behaviors or incompatible. If I'm not teaching a replacement behavior, then it's most likely DRO or other behaviors. And with the DRO, we reinforce in the absence of a behavior or when a behavior is not happening. So it's a little counterintuitive. With the DRO, you reinforce when the behavior isn't occurring. So the target behavior here is nail biting. Lauren receives reinforcement when she is not nail biting. So what does this resemble? A, non-contingent reinforcement. Well, the reinforcement is still contingent. It's contingent on the biting not occurring. Non-contingent reinforcement is when reinforcement is delivered no matter what. There is no contingency. We talked about DRA and DRI, differential reinforcement of alternative or incompatible behaviors. And what we said is DRA and DRI teach replacement behaviors. If we're not teaching replacement behaviors, we're likely not using these. We aren't teaching Lauren any replacement. What we're doing is reinforcing Lauren when she is not doing something. So when you reinforce somebody for not doing something, you are using a differential reinforcement of other behaviors. Now, you have to go through this each time you're doing these questions. The more you do it, the quicker you get. You'll be able to answer consequence questions and differential reinforcement questions very quickly eventually, but start slow and take the steps needed. It's going to make you more fluent. And when you get more fluent, you get more fast at the test. The light above your stove has burnt out. You need to replace the light bulb, but have not gotten around to it. It's been a couple of weeks, but you still sometimes try to turn the light on even though you haven't changed the bulb. What is likely occurring? All right, so we're looking at your behavior and what is occurring. What does the question mean by what is occurring? Well, what they're looking at is it's been a couple of weeks since your light burnt out, but you still are trying to turn the light on even though the bulb isn't changed. So let's think about that. Previously, you have the light on your stove, and then you have to replace it because usually when you turn it on, the light comes on, and now, of course, it doesn't because it's burnt out. Regardless, you still try to turn that light on even though you haven't changed the bulb. So even though you're not getting reinforced anymore, you're still trying to turn it on. So what does this situation represent? Well, originally, it represents extinction. Your behavior's on extinction is typically when you turn your light on, the light comes on, and you get reinforced. When the light is burnt out, you're not going to receive that reinforcement. So your behavior is initially on extinction. However, you're still attempting to turn the light on even though you haven't changed the bulb. So after a behavior's gone extinct and it's no longer receiving reinforcement, what is likely occurring? A, an extinction burst. Well, with an extinction burst, that's when the rate of behavior or the amount of behavior increases initially. Your behavior didn't initially increase. What's happening is you're going back to an old behavior that was on extinction, even though it's no longer being reinforced. So when a behavior reemerges following extinction, what do we call that? We call that B, spontaneous recovery. This behavior is reemerging following extinction. Now, regression, we always try to include this word because it is not a behavior analytic term. Be very careful about the word regression on your exam and when talking in a technical sense. Conditioned punishment, your behavior is not being punishment here. It's being put on, or it was put on extinction, and now you're going through spontaneous recovery. Your behavior is no longer receiving reinforcement, but still occasionally that behavior will come back even though reinforcement hasn't started again. So what is likely occurring is B, spontaneous recovery. After conducting a full functional analysis, Rochelle concludes that the function of her client sniffing pumpkin pie scented candles is automatic. Rochelle wants to put this behavior on extinction. Which of the following approaches would be most appropriate to begin with? So we're looking at another extinction question, and we're looking at what approach is going to be appropriate to put what kind of behavior on extinction? Automatic. And so when we're dealing with extinction, we want to look at the function of the behavior. The function of the behavior is going to tell us why that behavior continues to happen. It's going to tell us what is reinforcing that behavior. Is it attention? Is it a tangible? Is it escape? Or in this case, is it automatic? And automatic is challenging to put on extinction because that reinforcement is not coming from somebody else. It's either internal to the person or the person is delivering that consequence without anybody's help. Now, in this case, what is the behavior? Well, the behavior is the client smelling these scented candles. And so client continues to smell these candles. So what is likely reinforcing the client? Well, likely the scent, right? If the client continues to sniff the candles, that's because likely they're smelling that scent over and over again. So with extinction, what must we do? We've got to prevent reinforcement from happening. But what is the best way to prevent reinforcement here? A, remove all candles from the client's environment following the start of extinction. Now remember, for extinction, you have to give the client the opportunity to respond and engage in the behavior. We can't just remove all stimuli. We can't prevent them from responding. The only way to withhold reinforcement is if they engage in the response initially. So removing the candles from the environment doesn't help us. It doesn't give the client the opportunity to respond. B, provide access to candles, but prevent the client from sniffing the candle. Same thing with B. B is response blocking. Response blocking is not extinction. So be careful there. C, purchase candles with no smell and replace the pumpkin pie candles. Well, how does C work? Well, C is going to not deliver the scent following the response. So C looks pretty good. Usually they sniff it and they get the scent. Now they're going to smell the candle. They get no scent. This is a good example of withholding reinforcement. And then D, teach the client to request for pumpkin pie, maybe later on, but pumpkin pie doesn't have anything to do with this. It's all about the scented candles. So be careful of not associating the two just because they have similar ideas. We're looking specifically at the candle sniffing behavior. And so in this case, the way to withhold reinforcement while still giving them a chance to respond is to purchase candles with no smell and then replace the pumpkin pie candles. Joanna walks into the kitchen where her dad is cooking dinner. Joanna says, "I want some chocolate milk, please." And her dad pours her some milk. Joanna's behavior represents what? All right, so we have verbal behavior. You don't necessarily need to know this. You might not see it on your exam, but in practice, it's important you know these four verbal behaviors: echoics, tacts, mands, interverbals. Now, echoics are when the listener copies what is said. A tact is just a label. A mand is a request or asking for something. And an interverbal is answering a question or engaging in conversation. So you have to know those basics, at least for practice. So consider this just a teaching question. In this case, Joanna, she walks into her kitchen. Dad is cooking dinner. She says, "I want some chocolate milk, please." What has Joanna done? Has she echoed? Has she copied anything? Has she tacted? Has she labeled anything? Has she manded? Has she requested something? Or has she engaged in conversation or a question answer or answering a question? Well, she didn't copy anything, right? Nobody said anything, so it's not an echoic. She hasn't labeled anything, okay? What she's done is she's made a request. She's manded. Because for a mand is a request. It's not an interverbal because nobody asked her a question and nobody engaged her in conversation. She just made a request spontaneously. And so know those four basic things. Don't get too hung up on the question, but it's a good teaching question because you're going to hear these all the time in actual practice. And then finally, anything an organism does is considered blank, and a single instance of this is considered blank. Quick refresher on what a behavior and a response is. So anything an organism does is what? Well, anything an organism does is considered behavior. That's what we deal with day in and day out. A single instance of that behavior is considered a response. So A is going to be our answer. Now, why does that make sense? Well, because when we look at overall behaviors, right, we pick a target behavior. Let's say, I don't know, aggression is our behavior. Aggression is anytime that organism is aggressive, we call that our target behavior. Each instance of that behavior, which we're going to measure, is a response. So it's a way to distinguish between the two when we're measuring them and defining them and talking about them. Now, it's a little specific, but that's okay. We're making you aware. So behavior is the overall target behaviors, the big picture. Each instance is considered that response. All right. Thank you for watching. Check out btexamreview.com. Subscribe if you haven't already. As always, let us know when you pass so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.